In this screencast, I will discuss how to create 2 recordings from one CD. As usual, the process of ripping a CD begins by inserting the CD into the optical disk drive of the wax box, which I have already done. I also have already selected the appropriate genre for the CD that I inserted. The next step is to click the Read CD button so that Wax will read the table of contents of the CD and present the list of tracks. Now normally at this point you would press the Start button to begin the rip process while you then proceed to attend to the metadata. I'm not going to do that simply because the recorder that I'm using to record the screencast does a bad job with the progress bar. So just pretend that the rip is underway now. Now we can see that there are 2 problems that we need to address in the work metadata. One is that the name of the soloist does not appear. To address that problem, let's take a closer look at the raw metadata that Wax was able to obtain from the 2 internet databases that it queries, MusicBrainz and FreeDB. This is the raw data that Wax obtained from MusicBrainz. The name of the artist appears in the title, which unfortunately is so long that it doesn't all fit into the fairly narrow panel that's available. And there's no horizontal scroll bar, so you might be mystified as to how to get to the end of the line. What you need to do is position the cursor and then either advance it to the end of the line by pressing the N key, or you can go to the beginning of the subsequent line and then hit the left arrow to go back 1 character. Now at this point you can clearly see the name of the soloist. So what I'm going to do is select it using keyboard shortcuts. I'm now typing Control-Shift left arrow to go back 1 word and again to go back a 2nd word. And now I'm typing Control-C to copy the name to my clipboard. Now I position the cursor in the appropriate metadata field and type Control-V to paste, and there we have it. The other information that's missing is the date of the recording, which I happen to know is 1983, so I just type that in. Now let's take a look at the track metadata. There are issues here, and there are several ways to handle these issues. But I'm going to come back to that. Let's finish all of the easy jobs first. We'll take a look at the cover art. Wax was not directed to cover art by MusicBrainz, so we need to perform a search ourselves to see whether we can find it. The easiest way to do that is to use the drop-down menu that Wax creates based on the primary metadata that we just entered. We can choose any of these strings on which to perform a search. Usually the last one is the most useful because it combines the most information from the primary metadata. So I'm going to click on that now, and Wax immediately begins a search for suitable cover art. By the way, it's also possible to type into this field. So I could just type something here and then click the search button to perform a search on that string. Now notice that Wax downloaded 7 candidates for the cover art based on the search string that I used originally. We can step through the list of candidates that it has stored to find the correct one, which is right here, number 2. And just so to satisfy your curiosity, here's what the others look like. Most of them are completely irrelevant, but that's the correct one. So we now have the correct cover art and we have the correct work data. So let's return now to the tracks page to address the issues here. Our objective for this screencast is to see how to create 2 recordings from one CD. But before I describe the steps remaining in achieving that objective, I'd like to take a little time to describe how to create one recording from this CD, which is an option that might be more appropriate in some circumstances. If we were to create one recording for the CD, we'd like to do something with the track metadata to clarify the relationship of the tracks. The solution is to take advantage of a feature of WAX known as track groups. To form a track group, first select the tracks that will be in the track group. Once you have selected more than one track, the group button becomes sensitive. Let's click it now to form the track group. Now, it might appear that 2 of the tracks just vanished, but what actually happened is that WAX put all 3 of the tracks into a track group whose title appears here. To see the contents of the track group, click the right arrow to open it. Now you can see that the 3 tracks are present inside the track group, and they are identified by strings that contain only the tempo markings and not the redundant information that existed before. So in fact, forming a track group accomplishes another objective, which is to eliminate redundant information from the track metadata. The redundant information is the title of the work, and it's repeated 3 times, and it's so long that it isn't even possible to see the tempo markings, which is the only portion of the track metadata that we're actually interested in. Now let's go ahead and create a track group for the second work on the recording. And this time I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-G. So now we have 2 track groups for the recording. Let's return to the work page and consider what metadata we're going to enter for the work title. Well, one possibility is to specify a generic title for this recording. For example, I could say this is a recording of Concerti for violin. That might be sufficient in some cases. Or we might add numbers 3 and 5. So that's one possibility for recording. A second one takes advantage of another feature of WAX known as name groups. Let me show you how name groups work. First, we're going to return to the track page so that I can extract the name of the first work on the recording. I'm typing Control-C now to copy that name to my clipboard. And now I'll return to the work metadata and use Control-V to paste that name here. So at this point, we've simply returned to where we were before. We have the full title of the first work on the recording, but what do we do about the second work on the recording? Well, we can invoke the name group feature, which is done by clicking this right arrow. WAX opens up another pair of entries which we can use to specify the title of the other work on the recording. So let's return to the tracks page, repeat the steps that we performed previously. Control-C to copy it to the clipboard, return to work, select the entry, and Control-V to paste it in. So now we have in our work metadata the titles of both works on the recording. Now I'm noticing that the short form for the title doesn't quite fit into the entry for the short form. And remember that the width of the entry corresponds to the width of the column in select mode. So the fact that the short form doesn't fit here means that we won't be able to read the entire string in select mode. We can make the string a little bit more compact by changing the order of the words. So now I'm calling it Violin Concerto number 3, and you can see that that fits nicely. Now I notice that the metadata for the second work contains an error, which is unusual for MusicBrainz, but it still happens sometimes. And that is, there's a superfluous comma here, which I'm going to remove. And then I'll come down to the short form and perform the same operations that I performed for the other work, Violin Concerto number 5. So now we have the two works identified in the work metadata, and this would be a perfectly reasonable solution for storing this recording. I have returned to a point in the presentation that we were at previously so that I can demonstrate the steps involved in creating two recordings from one CD. The first step is to confirm that we have the correct work metadata. We do, except that we wanted to make a small change to the short form so that the entire string would be visible in select mode. Previously, we used track groups for two purposes. The first was to clarify the relationship of the tracks. That objective no longer applies because we know that the tracks represent the movements of the one work in the recording. The second purpose for creating track groups was to eliminate redundant information which obscured the unique information that we were actually interested in. That objective still applies, and in fact the information is even more redundant now because it is also present in the work metadata. So let's create track groups for the purpose of eliminating the redundant information. As before, select the tracks to be in the track group, type Ctrl-G to form the track group, Ctrl-X to delete the title of the track group, and then Enter to preserve that change, and Ctrl-Shift-G to ungroup. I will repeat those steps for the tracks in the other work. Now we need to select the tracks that we want to save in the first recording. They are the tracks corresponding to the first work. Let's obtain appropriate cover art for the recording by using the search feature. We'll select one of the strings that Wax prepared for us. And we'll scan the list and we find the desired cover art in the second selection. Now we can save the metadata for this recording. For the other work on the recording, we need to adjust the selection of the tracks. We can do that either by selecting the appropriate tracks individually by clicking the checkboxes or by clicking the reverse button. Finally, we need to adjust the metadata for the second work. We paste in the metadata that we extracted from the track group. We correct the error contained in the MusicBrainz download, and we make the same adjustment to the short form. And now we're ready to save the new recording. Be sure to check New Entry before clicking the Save button, because we want Wax to create a new recording and not overwrite the metadata that we just saved for the first recording. Now, to confirm that the two recordings exist, let's return to select mode, and you can see that Wax has selected the recording that we just saved. To find its sibling, we can drag the recording to search and then click on the entry for the sibling. If we double-click on this selection. That's the shortcut for changing to play mode, where we can see all of the metadata. And everything looks all right there. And now we can use another keyboard shortcut, which is page down, to view the metadata for the other recording that we just created. And everything looks fine there too. So that's the procedure for creating 2 recordings from one CD. In the next screencast, I will explain how to create 1 recording from multiple CDs. See you there.